is over now. This kind of a colonization. Decolonization is a political decolonization, is economical decolonization, is also intellectual decolonization. Somebody tell you your history, you are not free, so you must write your history. British people doesn't wait French to tell them about Arthur, they do themselves. French people they don't wait for Italian to tell their history. United States, they don't want Canada or Mexican to write their history, they do themselves. Chinese, they do the same. Why else? Why we must wait some British people, some French people, and to tell us our history? It's a kind of a colonization. This must be over.
Male, polio. This is the use of the watermelon as a stereotype with black face in it, and this was an advertisement for soap.
And this is happening around what period?
Well, it happened up, and it's still happening, quite frankly, but you'd see most of these in the 20s, 30s, 40s, in the 50s, and even into the 60s. You'd see a lot of advertisements like these. Even now, you still see sold in stores the little man who holds the lantern outside for your lawn, you know, a black figure who holds the lantern as a servant. This was a textbook that was used in the late 1800s. 10 Little Niggers, actually used in schools as a textbook.
In this country?
In this country, yes. It would be interesting to go through the pages of this textbook and see the stories, because they're even more objectionable than the title suggests, but we just don't have time to get into it. But again, if African American children have to rely on these images for understanding about who they are and where they have come from, then you can see that we are putting into the African American mind information that will distort reality.
So all of these images were designed to do what?
To defame black people, to, as you say, de-Africanize black people, to turn the African into something other than an African.
Okay.
For the purposes that we talked about a little earlier, to destroy the cultural base in order to destroy the political unity of the group.
Okay.
Okay, the question was asked in a magazine article some time ago, does television, because now we want, you know, you were asking earlier how long ago was this, and I indicated that these things continue to happen even in 1987. Does television have a secret formula for blacks? And we see the Jeffersons as one of the most popular programs on TV. And this is the picture that talks about what that formula is. It appears that on American television, virtually all of the programming that is done about black people is programming that is written by white people.
I was studying anthropology. I was told there were no mathematical systems in Africa, because where they were studying in the bush and the desert, people counted with their fingers. Mathematical systems were among developed Africans, which were never studied because the African is not developed. Okay, so that you don't look where you should be looking. So they never found anything. She found mathematical systems where there were complex peoples. People who needed mathematics because they were involved in intensive and extensive trading. And then scripts. I was told the Africans never wrote. That's what I was told in university. We are preliterate, they said. But don't worry, we are giving you scripts. I did not know that the English who were telling me the Africans were preliterate are preliterate also. The English have no script. A lot of people haven't brooded on that. There is no English script. The script you use to use Anglo-Saxon songs is Roman. The English never wrote. When the Romans attacked Britain, they found nobody reading or writing. One or two more. Africa has as many pre-European scripts. Africa has the Mande script. We have found about 200 characters in the Mande script, starting from Udmurtutek, 3000 BC, running across the Sahara. You can find remnants of it in the Vai script. We have the Akan script, both a drum script and a written script. We have the Faka script, the only script that African Americans brought to America. It's found in Suriname. They made the big mistake there because they brought too many of them belonging to the same tribe. They revolted and defeated the Europeans. The Europeans sued for peace, and the Africans said, if you want peace, give us guns. Which the Europeans did, and they retained their independence. And there are other scripts, the Meroitic script, which we are trying to decode and decipher, which we have not succeeded in doing, and the hieroglyphic script, which we thought had originated in Egypt, but which we know now originated at Kustal on the edge of the Sudan, at least 200 years before the first Egyptian dynasty. But where are the books, they say? The earliest books in the world are African. The Book of the Dead, or rather it should be called the Book of the Coming Forth by Night and Day. The pyramid texts, the Papyrus of Ani. You will hear tomorrow from Dr. Ben the profound impact of those books upon the thinking of the Greeks. Look at the medical literature of the world. They said the clinical method began with the Greeks. It did not. You can read the Edwin Smith Papyrus, Dr. Finch, whom you will hear tomorrow. Dr. Finch has done a commentary recently for the journal on the Edwin Smith Papyrus, showing it is only 1/3 of an earlier manuscript written down in the 18th dynasty by a surgeon in Egypt, and that it only deals with the head and neck and the brain. Yet there are 200 terms. There are 200 medical terms for things inside and outside the head. He said that they discovered in that very early time things which we only know today through X-rays. He said that they found the locus in the brain through which auditory information is processed. They were working on pulse taking 1,000 years before Herophilus, the Greek who was credited with pulse taking. Things, but their debt to Egypt was profound. And they admitted that. They admitted it. Even the gods. They took Zeus and all sorts of gods and goddesses out of Egypt. The goddess of chastity is Artemis, a black woman. Circe in the Odyssey is a black woman with African features, not just ritually black. Andromeda is represented as a woman with black skin in some of the early Grecian vases. Andromeda, who married Perseus, the Greek hero. And Medea, who helped Jason win the golden fleece, is represented as a black woman. And Isis, the mother of God, the sister of God, the wife of God, the female principle of the divine. She is not just worshipped among Africans, she becomes the major figure among the Europeans. Even Caligula, the Roman lunatic, worshipped Isis. It is found even in the British Isles. And Isis and Horus were first seen as Mary and Jesus, until Michelangelo comes in the scene and starts painting his family as Jesus. And so, how could you compare Sumer with Egypt? Ur, Lagash, and those places, those were city-states. They did not have the centralized network, the empire that the Egyptians created. And look at their writing system, the cuneiform tablets, the merchant bills and notes. They did not have the great literature of the Egyptians. Where is their literature compared to the literature of the Egyptians? The thousands of things that we have found even today in spite of the devastation. And look at their architecture. Who could compare the architecture of the Egyptians with the Sumerians? We cannot even reconstruct the Mesopotamian temple when the Egyptian works stand immortal upon the face of the earth. When the Sphinx, when the Great Pyramid was finished and it had its polished limestone casing, they say it was like a star over the earth. You could stand for hundreds of miles and see it shining. What is there in Sumer and in Babylon like that? They say the stone that was involved in the building of the Great Pyramid could build 30 Empire State Buildings. If you were to cut it into 1-foot cubes, it would encircle 2/3 of the belly of this planet. What are they talking about? And you look at all these things, you look at the medical documents you find in those Edwin Smith papyri, helminthiasis, ophthalmology, gynecology, pregnancy diagnosis, many things, studies of the pulse, studies in diagnostic percussion, fractures of the clavicle, dislocation in the mandible. Word for word, Hippocrates takes out the fractures of the clavicle and dislocation in the mandible and puts it in his work. And he's the father of medicine. We just have to be very careful, and this is something that happens in all movements, not to claim that everything is black. That is not necessary. The contributions of the black to the world are so great in terms of what we know now that it is not necessary to claim things that are not necessarily true. In the field of medicine, for example, they have found incredible things. They found vaccines among Africans long before Edwin Jenner. They found the smallpox vaccine had been brought to this country by Onesimus, a slave of Cotton Mather. They found that the Africans were using aspirin long before the Western nations, that the Bantu were using Salix capensis, which yields salicylic acid, the main active ingredient in aspirin. They found the Africans had made breakthroughs in eye cataract surgery in the 13th century. Africans were performing eye cataract surgery in the Empire of Mali, in the city of Djenné. Nobody in the world was performing eye cataract surgery at the time. And there were certain surgeries in Africa which taught surgeries which had a profound effect on surgery in Europe. In the 1870s, whenever the cesarean operation was performed, the cesarean section was performed in women, the woman invariably died in Europe. Because of the British Empire, the British learned that Africans were performing the cesarean successfully. A team under Dr. Felkin went out to East Africa among the Banyoro surgeons to study how they were performing this operation. They noted, please note, that the Africans had developed their own anesthetics and their own antiseptics. Antiseptics had only been introduced in an European operating theater by Lister 2 years earlier than the witness of this operation. Many doctors in Europe did not know, as late as the 1870s, that even if you perform a successful operation, your hands, the poison in your fingertips will kill the patient. They did not have proper antiseptics. They washed their hands in water. They found the Africans were using sterile antiseptics. They saw how they cut. They saw how they collapsed the abdominal wall. They saw how they took the baby out. They saw how they were able to take the cautery iron and stop internal bleeding almost instantly with minor tissue damage. They saw how the Africans stitched. They drew the stitches. They brought it back to Europe. And the cesarean operation after that was performed with far greater success. Nobody knows, unless you study the history of medicine, that that was what happened.
In history, I'm coming back to you, Pamela. You've been particularly lucky blessed, let me say, because in the system, the school system, there have been no arrangements made for you to get some backbone, put some starch in your backbone for your future. Fortunately, I say you've been blessed by your mother and father and your environment, you know, which feeds you. But can you imagine, can you try to make up for me a story of what would happen to you if you didn't know who you were? If you looked in the mirror every morning and you saw this little brown face and everybody thought it was so ugly, what do you think would happen to you?
Well, you wouldn't think very much of yourself, and you think, you know, you were nothing and nobody cared for you or anything. You didn't have any history, no background. You couldn't go forward because you didn't really know what had happened to you before.